And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. It's Friday, another week of fantastic food safety, quality, great products going out the door. If nobody says it, Cara and I are going to say it. Good job. You did a good job this week. We're proud of you. So we're glad that you're doing what you do. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat. And what we do every week at this time, so 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we bring in an expert and we talk about all things food safety. And one of the things that we love to do here in the chat is let us know where you're at. So I am in what's kind of weird here, Cara. I'm in Loveland, and it's foggy. It's like England out there.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Yeah.
And so, of course, Cara Mickelson is our guest here today. If you're familiar with the chat, we love having Cara on. She always brings all kinds of cool stuff. And so where are you and how's your weather?
I'm still in Toronto at IAFP, finishing that out. And I have to apologize in advance. I've been talking so much this week that my voice is like kind of scratchy. I feel fine. It's just a scratchy voice from having lots of good conversations at IAFP. So.
Well, and that's always the sign of a good conference. If you come back tired and your voice is hoarse and you've been having fantastic conversations.
And it gets better as I talk. So it's just kind of funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, I woke up this morning. I'm like, oh, come on. So, yeah.
And good morning to Tim and Alexis. Good morning. Oh, Alexis is saying foggy in San Diego as well. So one of the things that we do here in the chat as well, if you're new to the chat, is we love to have a ceremonial drink of your favorite beverage. So everybody, please join us. Cheers. Ooh, wonderful. Yeah, my coffee tastes extra good today.
Oh, yeah,
we have some wonderful faces that we know here that are coming in. Stephanie, good to see you. Claire, good seeing you as well. Nice. Yeah, up in Montreal, beautiful city, Montreal. Yes. Nice to have you here as well.
It is. Yeah, Toronto was gorgeous too. It was really
Toronto's a cool city.
So hospitable. So it was very nice.
It is. But Toronto's getting so huge. It's hard to drive around.
Yep. Yeah. We took Ubers and walked. I mean, you walk everywhere. That's the smart thing. They have a really nice train from the airport to the downtown. So that was really nice. And it was cheap. It was really cheap. So
that makes life much easier for sure.
Yes.
Yes. So Cara, of course, is with ChemStation, where she is the director of food safety and all things food safety. Yep. And as she had mentioned here a little bit ago, that she was at the IAFP conference. And so if you're on LinkedIn at all, holy moly, tons of people commenting, posting, group pictures, all kinds of things. So we're going to get a download from her on the conference. And also today's topic, which is going to be very interesting, which is something that you really need to think about, because this is kind of picking up steam now. And that's sustainability within companies. And an interesting aspect that Cara brought up for this conversation, I was like, ooh, that's a good one, is how does that intersect with food safety?
Yeah, and the reason I brought that up is because I actually co-convened a session with Neil Bogart and David Buckley and Genome Yan. We all put together a session for IAFP on sustainability. Is food safety a byproduct, or what are the byproducts? Because we had some real questions around, we want to be sustainable. Absolutely, we want to be sustainable. But sometimes food safety may get compromised, and we can talk through that because now there are these sustainability standards that are coming out, or certifications, not so much in the United States yet, but in Europe. And we're kind of running into, well, do they intersect or do they dovetail with food safety? So it's been kind of an interesting conversation.
Yeah, so I was thinking for our chat here today, we can kind of do a couple of things. We can weave in what you presented at the conference and some of the takeaways or key things that people may have brought to your attention. And then also more of a general conversation around this. Because a lot of times in what we do in food safety and food quality is we hear buzzwords, right?
Yes.
Food safety culture. And we've talked about this on the chat. What in the world does that exactly mean? It can become such an abstract term that it's difficult to quantify. So with that, Cara, let's kind of start off with this. And so when we're talking about sustainability in food manufacturing, what the heck are we talking about?
So a lot of times what that means to companies is water savings, right? Chemical savings, energy savings. So how do you go about doing that? How do you decrease your carbon footprint in order, but yet still make safe food? And it was really interesting to hear about how, we water is so Dr. Jeff Lejeune from the FAO actually gave a presentation on water and water reuse. Well, we want to reuse water. Water is a limited resource, but what if it's not safe? What if we can't ensure the safety of that water for our sanitation or for drinking? We need to make sure that that water is safe in order to use it. But so sometimes reusing the water isn't going to necessarily be the answer. And then, or are you going to add chemistry to it, or are you going to UV it to ensure the safety of it but if you're adding chemistry to it, now you're adding chemistry, which is, not necessarily aligned with sustainability.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting topic. It was really, really an interesting topic.
Well, so let me kind of poke on that a little bit, because in the dairy industry, we've been, and this is just what companies need to do, is every year within operations, you always have projects or things like this to figure out more efficient ways to manufacture. So to your point on the water, Cara, for example, in the dairy industry, you have, if you're a cheesemaker, they have what they call cow water, right?
Yep.
And everybody's like, cow water? What's cow water?
Yeah, you better explain that one, because otherwise people will think it's from Bessie or whatever. It's not.
Indirectly, yeah, it kind of comes that way, but it's not what you think. So cow water is when you produce cheese, right? It's about a 10-to-1 ratio of milk to cheese. So you've got all this leftover whey that you pull off of the cheese curds, and in that is a whole lot of water. And what happens is the plants have equipment and processing through filtration and other methods to extract that valuable stuff out of the whey, produce powders, so whey protein concentrates and things like this. And then also you got a whole lot of water left over as well. And what a lot of dairy plants will do, especially the bigger ones, will take that cow water and will then use that for cleaning. They will use it in non-pasteurized applications. So let's say, for example, you need to rinse out the milk truck that's coming back to the plant, or things of this nature. They'll use cow water. And it becomes really important in those plants then to have separate systems to make sure that non-pasteurized, not perfectly clean water, which is good enough for first passes on things, right, doesn't get used in critical applications, right? Anything post-pasteurization can't go anywhere near that.
Yep, exactly. And that it is a water savings, right? But you got to do it smart, because you don't want that water to end up in a use that is not appropriate and could lead to, a food safety issue potentially.
Yeah. So, really that just was efficiency within manufacturing. Right. Let's figure out a more cost-effective way to do things, and those savings involved with that. So how is efficiency and improving your operations different from sustainability? I'm still kind of confused on that.
Yeah. I think that's where there's a lot of questions, and I'm not sure that I have the answer necessarily, but and I guess I can give an example that I just ran into this week where, and maybe not necessarily with efficiency, I guess a little bit, but a company was wanting to reduce the number of chemicals that they use in their process for their sustainability efforts. So for instance, their detergents, they were using a detergent for on their equipment, they're using a detergent for on their floors, and they're using a different detergent for in their drains. And I guess this kind of falls with efficiency. They want to reduce the number of chemistry, but really each of those detergents has certain things built into it to be applicable for those applications. Yeah. So is it the right thing to reduce the number of chemicals? Because you may not get the same efficacy and efficiency out of those those chemistries if you decide to reduce them down to
Yeah.
1 or 2 different chemistries.
Mm.
For instance, drain cleaners, there's certain things built into it to ensure that you get the drain really clean. And you wouldn't necessarily want to use that same chemistry on your, conveyor belt.
Yeah.
It may not tolerate that type of chemistry. So I thought that was kind of an interesting one, because here they're like, our sustainability projects are saying we need to reduce the number of chemicals that we have in our facility, but we have to do it smart. We have to make sure that what we're using is going to be the smart way to use it.
Yeah, 100. Okay, I'm starting to understand this a little bit better now. So, okay, if you are just looking at it and say, okay, we are going to reduce chemicals, that's not a very good way to look at it, because, well, let's say, for example, that as a chemical company, a supplier in sanitation expertise like ChemStation or things like that says, okay, we're going to get involved on this, and we're going to start concentrating our chemicals. We're going to take a lot of the water out and make them more concentrated, so that our customers are using less waste in their systems. It's a win-win for everybody. We can ship chemicals more efficiently, and plants can use them more efficiently, et cetera. But if the plant doesn't understand that and keeps using the same amount of chemical, that's a big problem.
Right.
Plus, as we know very well in manufacturing facilities, there's kind of a view on, especially on the sanitation crew, that more chemical equals more clean.
Yes, that is. More is not always better,
No.
right? More is not always better. There's definitely a sweet spot there. So
yeah, and think about this too. If the plant is not looking at this from a bigger perspective, they're not backing up, and they're not really thinking about this. Validation is very important. So in order to clean equipment, this is one of the things, right, Cara? FDA walks into your facility and looks at your food safety plan. Sanitation is a preventive control in almost every application.
Yeah.
And FDA is going to say, okay, great, let's see your sanitation preventive controls. And their next question is going to be, are these validated?
Yeah.
And
well,
if
and
you're,
actually, though, with FDA, sanitation preventive controls, sanitation it's not a requirement for validation with the preventive controls technically, but is it a good practice? It's a good practice.
Oh, talk about that some more then, because cool, I'm learning something. So repeat that, please.
Yeah. So with preventive controls, sanitation, if you identify a sanitation preventive control, the FDA does not require validation of the sanitation preventive control. But they might require verification. So that's like your environmental monitoring program, your concentrations, and things like that. Now, the caveat is SQF, BRC, GFSI schematics may require that validation, that sanitation validation.
That seems like an oversight by FDA. I mean, how in the world, right? So I'm setting up a cleaning protocol for my company, and you come in as the expert and run the equipment and look at the water flows and figure out the concentrations, and then we do the testing to make sure everything worked correctly. We validate the process.
Right.
And then you say, okay, Bryan, you need to check every day for these concentrations and this temperature and this time. And here's how you check your wastewater, and here's your ATP to verify everything's working correctly.
Right.
Those two things are, man, that link between those two is strong. I would never.
It is. Yeah. So verification, though, is required. And environmental monitoring is required if you have a ready-to-eat product exposed to the environment. You have to have an environmental monitoring program. So it's, and I think, to be honest with you, and I mean, I'm not sure, but what I have been told is that they didn't require validation because if you think about it, there isn't really, it would be a really tough thing to regulate because there's many different ways to do it and many different tests and many different ideas around it. Now, I'm pretty sure, and again, I'm not sure, maybe somebody in the chat knows, but I believe FAO has a document on sanitation validation. eHedge out of Europe also has a document on sanitation validation. So there are documents out there. And again, if you fall under a GFSI schematic, you may be required to do, most likely, not always, but you may be required to do a sanitation validation.
Interesting. I learned something today. And that's one of the things that I love about these chats and the way I approach these and pretty much everything. And this is always a good way to look at things, Cara. is if I go to a conference and attend a presentation or listening to something like this myself, if I can pull one little piece of information out of that and say, okay, well, that's something I didn't really understand, right? I've improved my knowledge. That's a win. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah, no problem. Well, and honestly, this week, and I guess it's not necessarily that I gain knowledge, but in listening to these sustainability talks, another thing that came up was, with the water and water reuse, Carrie Rasmussen from Commercial Food Sanitation gave a speech, and she said that if you don't clean right the first time, you have to re-clean. So what's that? That's additional water. And I was like, I never thought of it that way. It's kind of like do it. And so preventing re-cleaning can actually add to your sustainability efforts.
Right the first time.
Right. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a really interesting take when she.
Yeah, that is a good point because you can think that you're doing the right thing and improving and making things more sustainable and producing product more efficiently. And when you go closer, you're actually not.
Right.
Very good point.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I thought that was interesting because I don't, people are always saying, reduce water, reduce water, reduce water. But maybe you do have to do a little bit more initially so that you don't have to redo it and have to re-clean and use all that water to re-clean.
Yeah, this kind of dovetails nicely with what Jim is saying here in the comments. And so we identified nitrile gloves as a large area of waste. Many companies are using crappy gloves that aren't very thick, and they can move to a thinner, higher quality glove and save thousands of pounds of waste. Yeah, good point.
That's true. That's a very true statement.
You get what you pay for. So if you buy crappy gloves that are breaking all the time and the employees are constantly changing them out, maybe not the best course.
Exactly.
Here's another little interesting twist on the glove thing too. We all know as well that gloves are kind of a false sense of security. You'll talk with employees and you'll say, hey, what you doing there? It's like, I'm doing something that's not too good from a GMP standpoint. And then they go, oh, no, I'm okay. I've got gloves on. And you're like, no, gloves are not this magic thing. And a lot of times too, they think that they're sterile coming out of the box, right? So there's this crappy cardboard box sitting on the end of the line and they're pulling gloves out of this box willy-nilly. I'm like, no, put them on and now go wash and sanitize the gloves because they're not sterile.
Exactly.
You can't just go clean.
And we've actually, in my previous life, been doing environmental investigations and found that the box of gloves is contaminated. And so they're pulling the gloves out, touching everything, and and it's contaminating everything. So.
Yeah, we actually did a study at a previous company where we were making cheese products and putting them manually into a machine. And so these workers are all around this table and doing this, and we actually found out that the gloves were worse. We installed hand wash like hand dip stations right there.
Yes.
And we would have breaks every 5 minutes or something like that. Everybody dipped their hands and things like that. And the quality and the micro improved.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. I know. And it always cracks me up, when you go out and you see, you go to the grocery store and they're wearing gloves and they're touching the money and then they're touching your food or things like that. And it's like it's not meant to protect, you. It's you have to do the right thing here. So.
Eagle does third-party testing on their gloves. 2.63 and 4 mil options. 5 mil to be part of the program soon. Very interesting.
Nice. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, Eagle, good company. I like those guys.
Oh, nice.
So that's a good segue, and thank you, Jim. I owe you one on this. So part of this, right, is whenever you have ideas on how things should be done and stuff like this, Cara, is who sets up these metrics? And so as we were preparing for this talk, and you go out there, just go on YouTube and do a search on food safety and sustainability. You'll see all these videos pop up. SQF had a paper that they put together, in 2017 around this that I was doing some research on.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So there's these metrics that are out there. So you have third-party groups who are setting these up. Retailers are asking you to do these things. Regulatory agencies, as we were talking about. Investment companies, that's a whole nother topic. non-government organizations as well. So there's all of these different groups out there, Cara, that are potentially asking for these things. What's your thoughts around that?
It's going to be interesting, right? I feel like we've been talking about sustainability forever, but there doesn't seem to be I think that's why they're starting to get these standards out there. Mm-hmm. At least I'm assuming. And yeah, it's very interesting because I think we're going to have to figure out a way to harmonize this all or to standardize this all because, and Angela Anadapa from Advanced Sanitation actually the Alliance for Advanced Sanitation actually gave a really nice talk about 4 different standards. And I can't remember exactly what she was talking about, but it was showing how even within these 4 different standards, they had completely different ideas about what sustainability was. And I think it was for foreign material detection. And one had certain parameters for it. And then one had nothing. And then another one had, really, really stringent things. So that's where it's like, well, how are we going to get this all harmonized? And I suppose that's where for food safety, we kind of, we have GFSI to somewhat set a baseline. And I don't know as if there is and I just don't know if there is a standard or a global standardization committee or anything like that around these sustainability standards yet. I don't think so. I'm not sure. I just don't know.
Yeah, and that's always an important point of the process that sometimes gets missed. You have to define your terms, which we started this talk off with, and then how are you being judged? And a lot of times we've seen this in what's loosely referred to as green movement and things like this, right? Which is kind of related in some ways. And companies that are then accused of greenwashing. It's like, okay, we'll put up this facade that we're doing all these things and look how wonderful we are, but behind the scenes they really aren't. And that just makes people mad when they find that out.
For sure. Absolutely. And maybe something will come as we progress through this. And I do think it is important because what I define as sustainable may not be what the next person does. And we need to have that baseline and that standardization.
Right. And I think too, right, is let's kind of bring this conversation around to I'm managing food safety in a company. Right. That's why it's really, really important that you're plugged into what other departments are up to. Yes. So let's say, for example, that the marketing team goes to a conference and learns all about the sustainability thing, and they want to start putting certifications on the product. And they give you a standard and say, okay, we're going to put this on our packaging, and you need to make sure that we're doing this. This happens in 3 months. And you're just like, oh, what? Right. And now you're trying to play catch up. You need to be getting in front of these groups so that they understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Procurement and all that. And again, Angela gave a great presentation where she had a box of strawberries and it had no stickers on it. Right. And then she put GMO on it. Then she put, or non-GMO, and then she put organic. And then she put sustainable or, whatever. And she's like, how much would you pay for this box of strawberries? Is that a premium? Is that and that's what, certainly because all of these things cost money for companies to implement, it probably is going to be a bit more expensive. Does it make it any safer? Does it make it any more desirable? I don't know.
In some ways, it may make it worse.
Right.
But, perception in the eye of the consumer is very important.
Yeah.
And what I always, and this is an important thing to remember in these topics, is that when you're talking in your company with groups who are thinking about pursuing these type of certifications, is adding and slapping all these different things on your packaging is not an additive process. It's like, oh, we'll be kosher and we'll be non-GMO and we'll be sustainable and we'll be free sourced or whatever term they come up with.
Yep. Free range.
Yeah, that's a multiplicative process. It makes things by multiples of 10 that more difficult in your manufacturing facility. It's not that simple. So for example, let's say, for example, you have an organic and a non-organic version for certification of your product. Well, you always need to run your organic product first and then transition to your non-organic product so that you're not cross-contaminating into the organic product.
Right.
Well, that necessitates that the organic product is always run first. And what if that doesn't work out, right? What if in your facility you need to do something different, or you don't need to manufacture? All these different permutations start coming up, and it just makes life incredibly difficult and causes waste. Which, if you're looking at this from this movement relative to sustainability and the different things we're talking about today, you're actually, to your point, as you said earlier, Cara, you're actually making it worse. Because now you have to shut down and you have to do clean outs and you have to do additional work in the plant to segregate all of these different runs for these different types of certifications.
Yep, exactly. And you have to understand what those certifications, implementing those certifications mean. So for instance, with organic, there's only certain sanitizers that are allowable. And if you're using a non-organic, a compliant sanitizer, that you can't run organic material. So it can be very complex for the processor.
And I've had more than my fair share of engaged in the discussions with organic auditors around sanitizers. Because a lot of times say, oh no, sanitizers not allowed. It's like they are in these particular applications.
Yeah.
And part of this as well is these standards don't remain the same. So the organic standards, there are bodies that meet and decide what is allowable and what's not. Synthetic lists and all these type of things. It's very complicated. And these things can have serious impacts on your business down the road once you're certified.
Yes. Oh, and I mean, we see it too. And not that SQF and BRC and GFSI is definitely, not the law, but you see that when those change, it can be a significant impact on the producer. And so that's why, and it's hard to keep up, right? It's hard to keep up with all the changes. And if you have multiple certifications, that's more than a full-time job, right? More than a full-time job.
Yeah, and something else marketing doesn't necessarily think about in this application. Let's say that you have 4 different certifications on your packaging, and one of those certification changes, or you have a bad audit and you lose that certification. When you read those agreements, you can't have their mark on your packaging if it's not certified.
Yeah.
So now you can't use that packaging. What do? Now how long does it take to get in new packaging with new graphics? Depends on the company. 2 months, longer. What do you do?
Yeah, and do you destroy it or do you wait? Ooh. Or and I mean that's a significant chunk, I'm sure, of a budget. So.
Yeah, well, think about that's a very good point, Cara. Let's say, for example, the auditor comes in, you have a bad audit, you get your certification yanked, and you have 500,000 pounds of inventory sitting in the warehouse with that label. You can't ship that.
Nope. And you can't exactly take a Sharpie and, cross it out either, right? So
just kidding.
Yeah.
Not really.
Oops.
Oopsies.
I know we could try, I guess, but
yeah.
I would say
and so a lot of times, who's pushing these things and why do they want them? So retailers, right? Everybody has a different perspective. So the retailers are looking at it from standpoints of how can they use that to promote their business. And so certain retailers have built up their business around these type of specialized markets and products. So think like Trader Joe's or things like this, where we bring in super cool, handmade, sustainable, green, fill in the blank products from all over the world just for you, right? Now, if you're a retailer, managing those things becomes very difficult as well to make sure that your credibility is maintained. So add on that sustainability.
Yep, exactly. And I think, we also have to think like with food safety, we're all food safety experts. We all do food safety because it's the right thing to do, right? Yeah. And that's what I think needs to happen with sustainability too. It's like, it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And in listening again to Dr. Jeff Lejeune's talk about water, it's like, wow, it is a limited resource, and we do have to be careful. It is the right thing to do to make sure that you're utilizing your resources in the appropriate manner.
Right. And it needs to be approached from that standpoint. And I like how you phrase that, because part of it then too is food safety and, right, it's not an or, it's food safety
Right.
and sustainability and food safety and efficiency and these type of things.
Yeah.
But as anybody who works in food safety knows, a lot of times what we do in this field, car, is just assumed to happen, and that it's always going to be safe, and it doesn't really matter what we do to it. And that, as we're talking about in this chat here today, well, boy, if you assume that, you're in a lot of trouble.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But and part of this too, right? So number one with this, and here, let me put in the comments here this SQF article for everybody on making your food safe and sustainable. So there's a link for everyone.
Oh, nice.
And part of this too, right, is you always need to take these things into perspective. Number one is you need to be part of the conversation. Make sure you're engaged with other groups. This is something we talk about in the chat quite a bit, is do not build this food safety technical bubble and you live in that. You have to communicate this information within your organization and at conferences, right? And going out and learning new things and sharing what you know and learning from others and making sure that your voice is heard on these issues. Because if you let it happen, it's not going to go the way you like, right? You're going to find out after the fact that these things have been decided and now it's your job to implement. And if you're complaining at that point in time, shame on you, because you should be raising your hand at the very beginning and say, I got some questions on this. And part of this too is being skeptical, because a lot of times, Cara, people forget that standards and any of these type of things from non-governmental agencies are a business. They're in it to make money. And okay, it's nice to have the kosher symbol on your product, but the rabbinical order that you're using for that is a great resource and they help you. And again, right, this is just like sustainability in that they have their rules of the game and you need to comply with those. And they're in it to make money. Right? You're sending them money for certifications, and that's their business.
Right.
So, of course, when you talk with them, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they want you to be certified. And part of this as well, and this is something that I think, anybody who's been in food safety and food quality for any period of time knows, is that getting in the door is very different than being there, meaning that they're very happy to be nice and compliant and easy to work with before you are certified. And then once you get in the door, then they start getting tough, right? Because they know that they've got you locked into their system. So don't ever forget that they have an incentive to bring you into these programs. So you need to be objective and do additional due diligence outside of what's being told to you. I'll pick on kosher a little bit more. As a generalized statement, I don't have an issue with kosher certification on products, but I'm just bringing this up as an example because I've heard it so many times. Right. Rabbis will say, having the kosher certification means you'll get more sales. Really?
Right.
Maybe. Right. Definitely within certain markets where the Jewish community understands the marks and what parv is and these type of things. Absolutely. Is this going to increase sales in rural Iowa?
Maybe not. Right.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So take the claims with a grain of salt, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and my daughter is severely allergic to peanuts, and I know I've talked about that in the past. But when we see allergy free, that's a huge deal for us. Like that's a huge deal. But I'm not allergic to peanuts or any kind of nuts, so it's like, I mean, for me, it's not. And so, you have that target market that you are going for. And, what's the payback, or, really what is the payback? Because when you think about it, 2% of the population has an allergy to one of the top 9 in the United States. Is that enough to push, a nut-free facility? And if you think about that, like, holy cow, like ingredients like flour and any of those ingredients coming from a nut-free facility, that could be a significant challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're good at it and you have a good niche that you're able to market to and provide for those people because they need food, that's great. That's great for your business, but you have to understand that. And I guess this is a good point too, is that never forget. I mean, this is true for any business, and it's true for us as well, is that you can't sell to everybody, right? The entrepreneur or things of this nature that try to sell to everyone sells to no one, because you have to customize your message and you have to be able to talk to your particular market. So getting a really good understanding of that, and understanding as a company and saying, okay, we're a coffee company and we want to pursue sustainability. As I said before, right? And you can kind of tell I'm really hitting on this, right? Is you need to be in that conversation and say, what does that mean, right? And how does it mean just within our operations? Does that mean within our downstream supply chain? Does that mean our upstream supply chain with logistics and shipping and saving on fuel? And do we put solar panels on our plant? Or what's the ROI with that? And all of these things need to be looked at, just like everything else we do in business, objectively. And you can't get caught up in the hype.
Yes, I agree with that. And again, it was very interesting to hear about these different platforms. And, you do have, and again, you have to do your due diligence and investigate, not unlike going with a GFSI schematic. What one fits your message, what one fits what you can do and what you can sustain, right? And being sure that it makes sense for your company.
Exactly, because just like any other certification, right? So we'll go back to the GFSI example. Any type of a certification you have in your company needs to be correct for you, right? So should it be, to your point, BRC or SQF or things like this, finding the right certification body, having the right auditor come in, all of these things need to match up. Sustainability and these other standards are no different. And we know that if you pick the wrong one, you're just setting yourself up for headaches.
Right. And potentially failure, right? Potentially failure.
Oh, yeah. So let's say that you go after these certifications and they aren't clearly defined, and the objectives and the metrics of how you're evaluated aren't clear. And then you get surprised, and you're going to be the one that gets blamed, because quality assurance, food safety, our groups are very often the groups that are called upon to implement these standards. So you're the person who's going to be doing the heavy lifting on this. So you better make sure you are okay with it.
Yeah. I agree. It's again, you just have to make sure that you're aware and that you do your research and you understand what those implications are. So.
Yeah, and part of this too is, and we see this on the investing side of things as well, with ESG and with the diversity things and things of this nature. A lot of times the groups that are pushing particular modes of operation or behaviors within your company, their objectives are not aligned with yours. So you have to be really careful on those sides, because let's say that you invite in a large investor into your company, and a caveat of that investment is that you must meet certain requirements. And I see this a lot. This happens more and more in the food industry now. And you have to do these things. You're now locked in, right? When you take, they're dangling this investment money out there, and they say, okay, fine, we'll invest in your company. We'll take a 20% stake. We'll provide this cash to you. However, here's the caveat with that. Here's what you have to do. And those things may not be right for your business.
Right, exactly. You just have to understand and do your due diligence. I totally agree. Yeah.
And this gets back to your water example from the beginning, right? If the example is too narrow and the requirements are too onerous relative to what you need to do manufacturing without an understanding of that overall context, if it's just you have to reduce water usage.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, does that mean that everybody now don't wash your hands anymore? Right.
Yeah.
That'll reduce water usage.
Yeah, there you go. Ooh, yeah.
Yay, win. Not so much, right? It doesn't quite align.
Yeah. Or companies will commit to an objective with no way to get there. All right, we're going to reduce our carbon footprint by 90% in 20 years. And then they're thinking, okay, cool, I'm not going to be here in 20 years. I don't have to worry about it. We'll make the pledge, but we have no way to get there. Oh boy, you're setting yourself up for failure there.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Have a plan, right? I think that's our biggest thing. That's the biggest thing.
Got some good comments going here. Raphael, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Sebastian, who's a regular here as well, always has good comments too. I'm always wondering why a company goes toward 3 food safety certifications. While some customers may prefer some versus others, it creates duplication. Oh, goodness, yes. And a lot of times too, you'll have addendums, right? So we're very aware of these in certifications where some companies will say, okay, great. Yeah, the GFSA standard is fine, but we want some other stuff too, right? And then these things pile up and pile up and pile up.
Pile up, yes. And is it the right thing to do, Yeah.
Yep. And so, here's another comment on the gloves as well with waste. Yep. So definitely we're getting some verification on what Jim was saying earlier. Yeah. And Raphael, marketing may have polluted action where they say you have a fair trade and then you have 50% extra sales price, but original producers are not receiving a price linked to the end sale. Oh, yeah. I mean, so kind of the methodologies and how you're tracking these things and all these type of activities. There was a company I knew in my past who had a related claim. I think it's kind of similar, so we'll throw this example out there, where our workforce is awesome, and we have a volunteer day every year, and 100% of our employees in our company volunteer for the volunteer day. Oh, okay, great. Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
100%, really. What they would then do is they would make everybody volunteer. It's like, all right, this is our mandatory volunteer day. Well, question, it's not volunteer then. That's compulsory, right?
Yeah.
So they were doing it, in my estimation of how this worked, they were forcing people to do a volunteer day and using it for the publicity under false pretenses. How long is that going to last before somebody in the company posts on Facebook or wherever, on LinkedIn, that, hey, guess what? This volunteer day isn't what it appears to be. Right. Now the company
like said, voluntold.
They have shot all credibility in the foot. And now that also then casts a bad shadow on other programs. Right. It's like, okay, well, if the company is doing this in this area, what are they doing in other areas? Are they really committed to what they're saying?
Yeah. That is.
Tim, like you're voluntold.
Yeah. I like that. That's so funny. So yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, one of the maxims in quality is always, when you're setting up key performance indicators and KPIs, Cara, is, man, you got to be careful what you measure. So the example that I like to use on this is environmental monitoring. If you set up an objective environmental monitoring that you will have 0 positives, guess what? Your plants are going to have 0 positives because you can incentivize them to have that. So if you were to actually go out and watch, right, the person who's doing the sampling is like, okay, well, I'm going to sample for my listeria sample. Boop, right? They know they're supposed to sample a giant area, but they just go boop, right? Because they don't want a positive. In micro labs in the past where I've worked, right, I would have samples, retests come back from plants, and they had a hit in environmental for the first round, and then they're resubmitting their vector analysis samples for confirmation and these type of things. And you open up the sample bag and it just reeks of sanitizer.
Oh, yes.
And you're like, really?
Like,
really?
I bet that's going to be negative.
Yeah, I'm thinking too. Hey, Neil, good to see you. I think Neil was at the conference as well. I saw
he was. Yeah.
So, gosh, I got to get out to these conferences. I miss seeing everybody. I haven't been to a conference.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was, like I said, I lost my voice because I was talking so much. I know, crazy. No, it was so fun, and they do such a great job. I mean, it really, this conference is run so well, and just so much information. It's like information overload for everybody.
Yeah, something else to think about with these standards as well, Cara, and this goes back to this article from SQF that I linked here a little earlier, is a standard is rarely just one thing. So, for example, if you look at GFSI standards, you're looking at all kinds of stuff. So management commitment and document control and traceability and training and on and on and on and on and on. So these type of certifications are the same. Right? It's just not water usage, for example. There's all kinds of different things. So when you look at that SQF article, they're talking about social management, right? So how are you interacting in your community? What are you, quote unquote, giving back, or things of this nature? Environmental management, reducing waste and things of this nature. Big problem the dairy industry had for a long time, which I think they've done a great job of fixing, is waste, right? So you have this waste stream from dairy manufacturing of cheese, and you have wastewater treatment plants and all these type of things. And a lot of times you have high salt contents, and what do you do with this stuff, right?
Right. Yep.
Monitoring and management review, right? So that sounds familiar, right? So SQF is saying, okay, great. You have to have feedback mechanisms in place in your system, KPIs, and management needs to be engaged in how these metrics are being controlled. And levels, right? Levels of certification. We see this in standards, right? Where you have a base standard and then a little bit higher and then the super duper standard. What's the correct level of certification for your company, and what does that actually mean? If you're going to jump directly to the highest level of certification, probably not a good idea.
Right. Building on it. Yeah. Building on it for your company. Yeah.
Right. So when you're having these conversations, I think it's really important to put your technical hat on when you're in these conversations. And again, this is something I talk about a lot, is you have to be technical and you have to understand all this information, but you have to be able to communicate this externally to the other groups within the company, so that the procurement team and everything else, as they're looking at these different type of certifications, you're objectively asking these questions to get clarity. And remember, right, as part of the food safety quality assurance group within a company, you're part of a business. And this is really a business decision. And your technical expertise in deciding whether or not your company should be pursuing sustainability goals or objectives or things of this nature, you need a voice at the table. And in order to do that, you have to do it in a positive way and explain to people all of the benefits and all of the negatives. I don't know necessarily negatives, right? But all of the consequences, maybe is a better word, of pursuing these type of activities. So if we do this, these are the risks. What is the benefit? Because if you don't see a benefit, why would you do it?
Right. And Neil said, it's more than just the standard. It's the question is, are they truly living it? And I think, we realize that in food safety and with food safety culture, right? Are we really engaged? Are we really, do we stand behind it kind of and live it?
Yeah, exactly. And a good way to always look at things is to throw at the end of a potential position or statement or things, and then what, right? We're going to pursue sustainability certification. And then what, right? And that is meant to kind of lead that conversation and really tease out and parse out, what does that mean for our company?
Yes. And I think too, you kind of had, we've brought this up, you also have to look at the other certifications. It's like what we were talking about, and that they align, and like Neil said, we're living it. We're not just going through the motions, and not unlike the example I gave at the beginning, where the company was like, we need to reduce our number of chemicals, but not really thinking of the implication of doing that. Is that really a good thing to do for your company?
Right. We need to reduce chemicals. Well, that statement implies that we were using too many chemicals to begin with. Were we?
Right.
Let's make sure that premise is correct before we move forward.
Right. Exactly. Like we could use one chemical, but is that really the right thing to do? Are we then going to have to reclean, and then our water usage goes up? And it's like it doesn't make sense if you have that.
Yeah, it's like in our homes. We're going to reduce the water flow in shower heads. Yay! Government says, yay, good for us. Well, if you shower twice as long because the water's dripping out of the shower head than you used to shower before, are you really saving water? Probably not. We won't go there too much, but low flow toilets, right? Flush. Right. Okay, fine. What did you really save? No, you didn't, but it looks good on paper, to Neil's point. Oh, we've reduced water.
Exactly. Are you living it? So that's really important to understand.
Yep, you have to. And this is, I think, where the food safety, quality assurance, and the manufacturing groups especially need to have a voice up front with these things and really start fleshing these things out. Okay, fine, this is nice from a public standpoint, but we need to set this up for success, and we need to make sure that whatever we decide to do, we are truly doing, right? Because if we're not, nobody likes to be fake. And we want to be authentic, we want to be genuine, and make sure that what we're doing, we're walking the talk. Right, I guess is the thing.
Yes. And it makes sense. Like we keep going back to that. It makes sense for your company. And it's not just lip service, right? It's not just we're sustainable. We're, reducing our carbon footprint. But what does that really mean? What does
it really mean? And so Austin had a good point here on that same topic then. This conversation makes me think about human resources sustainability. Turnover is obviously an issue, but companies seem to think that new employees are an infinite resource. Yeah, true. It's like, we'll just get some temps in. We'll just hire some more people. Really? I mean, we all know how expensive it is to hire and train and bring in good people. And Austin brings up a good point, right? And just that phrase, right, kind of hurts my head, Cara. Human resources sustainability. Boy, what in the world does that even mean?
Right.
And so being able to sit back, and this is kind of an old reference, right? I'm an old guy. Columbo, right? It's like, excuse me, right? And you just kind of sit back and ask these questions. And there's no rush, right? You need to take the time to figure these things out.
Right.
What are the unintended consequences is what I wrote here in my notes. And that's 100% true. And think about it then in terms of the end goal. What's our end game with this? What do we want? What are the outcomes? How is this going to benefit the business? How is this going to resonate with our consumers? And I think a lot of times this goes back to an important point is a lot of times we forget about our consumers.
Right.
Go out there and do some research and work with the marketing group and say, what does this mean to our consumers? And figure out ways to find out what they're actually thinking. Because if you just give generic questions, you're going to get generic answers. If you ask your consumer base, do you care about the environment? Well, what are they going to say? Right? Of course, they're going to say yes. Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you say, would you be willing to pay $1 more for our products if we do X, Y, and Z? All right, you're getting closer.
Right.
But part of it is that saying you'll spend more and actually spending more are two different things.
Right.
So you could be very surprised in the marketplace. So maybe what you would do in those type of scenarios is, as you're parsing these things out within your company, is do a test.
Right.
Do a test.
Yeah.
No,
that's a great idea. And I think too, and like we said, sustainability has been around for a long time, but you also have to just ensure that do your customers really understand what that means? And the reason I say that is, I have friends that are like, oh, I buy only organic because it's so much healthier. And it's like, is it? I don't know. I mean, not maybe not. And so you just really have to understand the implications of the certification and
and what does healthier mean?
Right. Yeah.
Healthier to who?
Right.
This is why it becomes very, very important, again, to make sure that you understand your target audience. And your target audience can't be like what most people put in a food safety plan, general population.
Right.
No, right? Who is your target audience? If you're making a product for kids, that's your target audience. Do the kids care about the certification? No, right? Kids care that it tastes good. Do the parents care about the certification? Well, the parents are the one paying for it. So you better be talking to the parents. And to your point, if you're talking with them about these certifications and the parents say, I only buy organic because
right,
and they're willing to pay more, then that's something that you can pursue.
Right.
But you need to be very clear on those expectations and that end goal.
Yes, absolutely. And just again, living it, right? Living it, and not just being a standard where you check the box.
Mm-hmm. So, and again, this is something I think that comes back on this chat quite a bit, Cara. is the interconnectedness within companies. And the better you're able to do this at a production facility, at corporate, even externally to your company, at conferences like you're talking about, it doesn't matter, right? You need to get out of that safe technical bubble and have these conversations with groups outside, because we actually have a superpower as well. We have an advantage.
Yes.
Because we are technical, we have automatic authority in particular areas. Right? And in some ways, those things transfer over. So when we have these conversations, we can use that expertise to help facilitate those conversations. Now, we can't just go in and say, well, I'm an expert and I'd say so. Right? No, that's not going to work either.
No.
And the other part of it as well is you have to be able to go in with an open mind and solutions. The other thing that you don't want to do is, no, we're not going to do this. No, this is stupid. Why? Why is it stupid? Right? You have to be able to have those conversations with other groups within your companies.
Yes. And that communication is so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's so important to have all of that tied together, and understand. And in a company, a lot of times they'll have a sustainability officer or a sustainability manager. Make sure that they have that communication, and it's not just it's like our HACCP plans, right? And our food safety plans. It's not just that one food safety person that's responsible. It's everybody. So, and you have to have that buy-in and that culture.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be part of the business. So let's kind of bring this back to the 30,000 foot level, Cara, and help kind of summarize for this. What are kind of your key takeaways from our conversation here today?
Well, communication, right? I think that's the biggest thing that, and not just the lip service, the actually understanding and doing your research and making sure that you apply something that is, valuable for your customers as well as your company.
Yep. Setting yourself up as the objective evaluator. And it's kind of funny, an analogy just popped in my head is, let's say, for example, your 6-year-old comes running to you and says, I want a puppy, right? I want a cute little, wonderful, yummy. Oh, they're so wonderful. They're so cute, licking my face, everything else. As the parent, what you do then is you say, okay, son. I agree. Okay, let's talk through this. Who's going to take care of the puppy? Oh, well, I thought you were dad. Oh, really? You did, right? Who's going to pick up after the dog in the yard? Who's going to train the dog? Who's going to walk the dog? All of these type of things, right? It parallels the same thing. You need to be able to pull out of that conversation and get past the it's a cute puppy phase and ask the questions behind the scenes of the actual execution.
Yes, I agree. Completely agree. Absolutely. Yeah. Education and communication, right? That's what it always boils down to. So.
Yep. Be careful what you wish for. So.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I definitely don't need a puppy. So.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, gosh, time's already ran out on this chat.
It went by fast.
It did. Wow. It's amazing. So part of this as well is so guys, if you like to keep updated on topics like this, join my locals group. It's free. And a few times a week, I post what's going on in recalls and activities and regulatory and all of these type of things. And it's a nice, simple way. I push this out to your email. It's a nice, simple, easy way to keep up to date on what's going on. Because for things like this, right, there's always something new coming. And you have to be able to have this conversation. If somebody pops their head in your office and says, hey, we're going to pursue sustainability, and then they leave, you need to know what they're talking about and what your opinion is on it and what an action plan is moving forward. You have to be ahead of all of these things. And so part of that is being on this chat. And speaking for Cara and myself, thank you for being here and doing that. Because, taking an hour out of your week and sitting in a hotel in Toronto and doing these type of things is an investment. It's an investment in food safety. It's an investment in your company, and it's an investment in you, because this knowledge continues with you wherever you go in your career. And we know very well in food safety that what we do goes beyond company borders. It's not a point of competition, and we're all in this together relative to food safety. So the more that we learn and the more we're able to share, the better off we are. So Cara, thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always awesome having you on. You always have such cutting edge topics and things that I know our audience is very interested in. So
Oh,
thank you
good.
very much for
Great.
that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, and again, guys, you did a great job this week. Another one's in the books. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great one. I know I'm going to. And we will see you back here next week. And we live stream at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter at this time. And so we will see you back here next Friday for the next chat and all of these awesome people who attend with us. So, Tim, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. And we will see you here next week. Cara, have a great time.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye, everyone.